The focus on the mental health of men in football intensifies by the week, even at finals time. The sad loss of Danny Frawley has jolted all of us into greater awareness, and Spud represented only the tip of a giant iceberg. One of those wrestling with mental wellness in recent years is Brian Lake, a triple premiership player during the current decade, a man whose life has tumbled to the brink of disaster in recent years. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Before I knew better, I thought you were auditioning for the role of the lead in a biopic about Charlie Sheen. Your life seemed to be out of control.
Definitely, and that's what it felt like. And that's probably how it's been portrayed and how it's looked at. Brian's just lost control in the last sort of 12, 24 months in life, and it's been embarrassing. It has been embarrassing, this period of time in my life, but it's gone back from a long time ago. It's probably, you stem back to 2011, but it's probably 2012 when I did the trade to Hawthorn. It was Christmas time at that stage back in Adelaide, and drinking heavily over Christmas, I ended up breaking down to the wife that I was really struggling.
Do you know why you were breaking down with Shannon? Was it about the marriage or it was about the big world?
It was just about the big world. I didn't manage my mental health. I didn't manage relationships with friends and really close family. Everything was just, for me, was just football. When things got tough, for me on a personal level, I'd always go back to football. Football was everything. And I felt safe in that environment. So I felt safe. I was stable in that. Talking about it now with my psychologist, football was an exoskeleton for me. It provided me stability for 15 years. Previous to that, I probably wasn't a stable person. And that's what I've learnt over a period of time this last 2 or so years, going to different mental health hospitals and going overseas and learning more about the person I am. And going back to that 2012, that's what I broke down. And for me, I had those periods probably in 2012 by myself. It wasn't until I broke down in front of my wife, Shannon, at that stage, that she couldn't sit there any longer and watch it happen. She ended up calling Marty, who was my manager at that stage and really good friend, and told him that I needed help because I wasn't willing to put my hand up and say I needed it.
Marty, Brian's introduced you. Marty Pask, you were a teammate of Brian's at the Bulldogs. You later became his manager and you've been his virtual guardian angel for the last 4 or 5 years.
I guess my role has always just been to be there for him. And I think that's the hardest thing is, you know, I heard Wayne Schwass speak last week and I thought what he said was really profound. And, you know, just being there for someone and ensuring that you're there to pick up the phone or go see them or help them. You don't have all the answers and you're learning just as much as probably what they are, but in the end you just want to be there and help them and assist them and put them in the right direction to ensure that they're getting the help they need.
Brian, we've had you before in this chair with a different theme. You were jovial then, the joker. It's much different now. You're a man with a heavy heart, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's probably, you be that jovial person, it's probably, it's an easy cover. When tough questions get asked, you try to make light of it because you want to avoid those uncomfortable situations. And being jovial, for me, I felt comfortable with that because it's like putting on an act, really, that I didn't want to show emotion. In
your expression, the psychiatric term is self-soothing, is that right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of alcohol. Was it with drugs too?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a period for a couple of months there. 2018, September, October, around that period of time. I'd just come back from a TV show, Survivor. I think it was 48 hours after that. The wife wanted to separate. I ran off like I do because I avoid pain. You avoid those uncomfortable feelings. And that's what I've been doing for years, is that avoidance and not accepting it and embracing it. So I ran off to Bali within... We talked about it on Monday. I was in Bali Monday night. I spent, I reckon, 4 or 5, 6 days there.
By yourself?
By myself, yep. Ran over there, did the accommodation while I was at the airport, did all that. And then I know Rick Holland Shaw lives over there, so I caught up with him after a couple of days, spending some time with myself. Had a few drinks, went out with some of the boys that live over there, and they were having a camp over in a footy competition over in Japan. They said, well, do you want to go? I said, why not? Something...
Good idea.
It seemed enjoyment. You could say self-soothing. It was just like, well, I've never done this before in my life, where it was just spur of the moment, bang, I'm going to go over there. And I enjoyed it. But with that, I wasn't in the right headspace. And you talk about self-soothing, it was the alcohol that makes you feel good for that split second that you're having a few drinks, it takes that pain away, and it's self-soothing. If it's that, if it's alcohol, it's drugs, even simple things like a mobile phone. You get home from work and stress, you jump on your phone and you take yourself out of that environment that you're in, that you're just, it's like an out-of-body experience, really, that you're just not living in that moment. You're living in your phone, or you're drunk, or you're doing all those other things.
Let's stay with Japan. You got into trouble in Japan, ended up in jail. We'll get to, Marty, you can tell us how it unfolded, but you spent 5 or 6 days in jail, and it could have been 21 after a brawl in a nightclub.
Yeah. And it was all caused from that running away, not facing the issues and the pain that I was dealing with a marriage breakup. Hindsight, you sit there and you work out these things. You don't run away from issues like that. But that's what I had been doing for a long period of time, is avoiding uncomfortable situations. And once again, get drunk, don't know what I'm doing, not in the right headspace before I had a drink. And I got in an argument, and all I can remember was there was about 7 or 8 police officers grabbing me, throwing me in handcuffs, and then the next thing I wake up in a jail cell in Japan.
What happened before that?
We had the argument after I had a few drinks, and then, like anything, the alcohol heightens. If it's drugs, alcohol heightens your emotions. That you have a drink, if you're angry just before you're drinking, it's amazing. Then you get angrier, and then you get in an altercation.
So you bopped the bloke, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, obviously I denied it at that stage because I couldn't quite remember what had happened, but seeing the footage on it, I did punch him.
So, Marty, you're back in Australia. Department of Foreign Affairs rings. It's an international incident, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And look, I mean, a lot of moving parts are happening at that stage. Obviously, the media are all over it, and I guess the hardest thing for me is making sure that Brian was okay. And in those environments and situations, you're dealing with a foreign law and a different government. So Brian at this stage was without his medication. He was in a cell. We didn't know what was going on and didn't know the story. So for mine, I was always concerned because going back to 2012 when I first got notified, when Brian came to me with these issues, and then he's in a cell on the other side of the world, and I knew he wouldn't be in a good headspace to begin with because he'd just come back from Survivor, and within 2 days he's off and overseas again. So I thought it was important to obviously get there and be there for him and to obviously help him through that. I guess that had been my role for the last few years with him.
Julie Bishop ring you?
She didn't personally, but I got a call from her office or the office in Canberra at the time and said that you've got a friend overseas at the moment and he needs some help and for me, that was probably the real key moment in Brian, where I really started to see that, there were some underlying issues and they were starting to bubble away at the surface and how we had to get a plan together and look after him and try and help him. But, it was a hard sort of 4 or 5 days trying to get him out of there and obviously, communicating with his family back in Australia as to what was going on because a lot of people were worried about him.
Brian, is this, and I hope it's not, but is it humiliating for you to be talking on national telly about the way your life has sort of spiralled out of control?
It is. And as soon as you put my name into a Google search, the first couple of pages are all this that's happened in the last 2 years. Not about the good stuff that you've been able to do. It's these things where that at the stage, when I was in the jail cell, it just didn't worry me. I just had so much other things in my mind. I'm laying on a floor in a Japan jail, and it didn't hurt. It just didn't worry me because of these other issues that were just overtaking my body, overtaking my mind. That laying in a jail cell, I just didn't comprehend what sort of trouble I was in.
How scary was it for you, Marty? You were a detached observer.
Well, more recently, really scared. When he obviously came back from Japan, I coordinated with the Players Association, who were really, really good in this space, to get him somewhere, to help him with some of the areas that Brian's talking about in terms of, his outlets, which were alcohol, a short time with drugs, and obviously trying to get the right sort of prescribed medication and a support network around him. So we felt that there was a situation, or rather a facility in Thailand. So we sent him there, where he spent a good amount of time just to get away and lock himself away from everything. All the reports were good when he came back. And then, unfortunately, he had a pretty major sort of slip-up shortly after when he came back.
What was that?
I was driving along to work just on a Monday morning. I got a call at about 8:30 in the morning. I don't know how they got my number. I think it might have been in your phone or something along those lines. But, the doctor at the hospital had said that you've got a friend in here and he's under surveillance and he's severely medicated and he's talking about harming himself. And, that was sort of an instant sort of moment there where I thought myself, I'm like, well, what do I do now? Fortunately enough, through the previous experiences with the Players Association, there was a great contact in there in Matt McGregor at the Players Association, and I rang him straight away and organised a facility for him here in Melbourne to get to. And
That's a rehab centre?
It was a rehab centre, and when I got him from the hospital, I thought, that's about his lowest point. And that drive over from the hospital over the Westgate Bridge to the other side of town to drive him was about as concerned I'd been for him through the whole journey, where he was pretty low at that point.
How were you, Brian? Do you remember that drive?
Yeah, brief. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, and just listening to it, it's tough.
I know it's tough. I admire your bravery in fronting this stuff, but I think you are at a point that you want to get better, don't you? And you did Danny's situation have a big impact on you?
Yeah, listen to his words, and I fought it since I started medication about that I was okay. If I was chopping and changing medication because the side effects I was having with some of them, I'd have a good 2 or 3 months that I was feeling good. I think, well, I probably don't need to take them now. I'm back on track. I'm back to normal, Brian, and I'll be okay. Don't take the medication for 3 or 4 days. Get to the club. The side effects are coming off straight away. Dizzy, can't focus, and I've missed training sessions from it. And
Is this at the Bulldogs or at Hawthorn?
At Hawthorn. I'd missed probably 3 or 4 from in that 3-year period where I thought I was okay. And it even happened one of the game days. I was interstate and I didn't take my medication with me, and I struggled through the game where I couldn't focus, blurry vision, agitated, because I thought, no, I'm okay. And I battled with that for 5 or 6 years, and what I felt was the medication was just a Band-Aid. It was just to try to get me level, but the issues I was dealing with were still there, the underlying issues that I still had to deal with. Understanding, I guess, myself, accepting that I've got an issue. And it hadn't been until probably 3 or 4 months ago, probably 3 months ago, that I've accepted it finally. That I need help, and since then, seeing a psychologist every fortnight, paying attention more to sleep, to just routine and structure, and that's what I rebelled from since I finished football. I just thought, well, I've been forced to do this. I'm forced to be here at this time, do this, do that. But in hindsight, I needed that. That's what kept me sane for a long period of time. It was only until that was taken away that I thought, no, I'm okay. But now realising that, Jesus, wish I'd started doing this a little bit earlier. Instead of just thinking that the medication was going to do everything, I needed to speak to someone.
Marty, did you find Brian at home one day, after a heavy drinking session?
No, I didn't. That's a good friend of ours, Matthew Sutton. And, you know, Matt and his family were fantastic through this as well. And, look, our whole role was just to try, while Brian's talking about that, was just to get to him and tell him that, you know, we cared about him, and, you know, we're here for you. And, you know, Matt and myself had spent a lot of time by his bed and tried to help him and put him on the straight as much as we could. But that particular incident, it was a Friday night, and that was that phone call that you fear, and it was Matt, and it was about sort of 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night, and you just knew that that night was going to be a tough night, and you know, Brian had obviously got himself in a state. And, you know, again, you know, we had to put him back into the facility and help him. And I think that was just about the rock bottom that, you know, looking back on reflection, that, you know, Brian needed to really start looking at, you know, what was going on. And a lot of these things that he's talking about, it's very hard to communicate with someone when they're feeling those emotions.
Brian, I see you now, and we bleed for you, mate, I do, and people at home will be. But when you came into Fox today, it was like you were coming home. Everyone wanted to say hello to you and talk, and you were the old Brian Lake. You notice the contrast? I mean, they care, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And it feels good. When tough times, you definitely do. It's a time to sort out. It's a filter of friends, really, of who really cares. And I've had friends in this period of time probably just found it too hard. Like Brian's this, Brian's that. I'm not going to deal with his crap. It's just too hard. And I've lost a lot of friends through it.
Well, I know might be a dagger to the heart, but you and Adam Cooney were bosoms.
Yeah.
I mean, it was as if you were joined at the hip. You're no longer friendly with Adam, are you?
No, that relationship's been fractured through.
Is that over the girls?
Yeah, and like anything, if you get a text and they say you're okay, what you do normally, I'm fine. Put a thumb up emoji, and you try to avoid it. But I guess what you find is the people that care the most won't just accept that emoji. They will ask you again. They'll keep pestering you. Some people didn't do that. If that was Adam, probably. And probably the girls probably make a big thing with that as well, that when there's a relationship breakup, there's people go to one side, people go to the other. And unfortunately, Adam and his wife went with the wife, and I just felt hurt, probably betrayed by that as well. That I was hoping that I had more friends that would support me. Probably at that stage I didn't care, because I thought I was so enthralled in what was happening and what I needed. I didn't really care about anyone else. I just wanted answers, and I wanted results. And it hurts. But that's what happens in tough times. You sort out your really good friends and probably the people that really care about you. When I was, I guess, struggling with the thoughts and struggling with sleep that I did go to the doctors and get sleeping medication to help me get into a sleeping pattern. If it's sleeping at 11, waking up in 7, because the sleep is the most important thing. If you're tired, you're grumpy, that leads into your bad food choices. You then look for higher fat content or higher sugar because you need to try to lift yourself up. You have that coffee with 2 sugars. So sleep is number one. Sleep is everything. So I had sleeping pills prescribed to me, and it was that Friday night I was sitting in the movie room, just having a glass of red, had a cup of sleeping pills to help me get to sleep that night. But then I got caught texting Shannon at that stage and going on about what was happening, and started drinking a little bit more red and going out and grabbing a couple more pills. And I still don't know why. All I remember was waking up in the hospital.
You want to have a breather?
Yeah.
Can you finish that story?
Yeah. So yeah, I woke up in hospital and not knowing how I got there, and my brother come pick me up in the morning, and obviously I was still out at days, and Marty had been speaking to him throughout obviously the night. My brother took me back to the hospital straight away, where I spent another sort of 10 days there. So it ended up being probably 20 or 30 sleeping pills that I took at that stage. And looking at it now, probably what saved me was, one, my stepson was there, and probably I'd end up drinking 3 bottles of red, which what I was told would help, because I just threw everything up, which in the ambulance when it arrived. So still, I don't know what I was doing.
With the tablets, when you were pumping them in, did you have anything in your mind about...
I can't... From when I started and watching the movie, there was a point that I just couldn't remember what I was doing. And I remember texting a couple of times, then everything just went blank.
Texting who?
My wife at that stage. So then the next sort of 16 hours were just... I can't remember. And it's just people filling in blanks, and probably haven't dealt too much with what I was thinking or trying to do at that stage.
Have you been able to... marriage breakups, and I'm talking... I have experienced this. Have you been able to move on, or are you still... Is the disintegration of the marriage still weighing on you?
That weighed heavily on me. It's correlation of everything. And it seemed in one period of time, when I got back from Japan, Mum passed away in August. So in July, the marriage issue, then Mum passing away, then it just felt like my whole life was just unravelling, and I couldn't control any of this. These things I'd been able to control most of my life for a long period of time, but these things, I couldn't understand why I couldn't control it. And that's where the fear come in, and those behaviours come in, those unhealthy behaviours of finding out what she's doing, checking through Facebook and trying to put this jigsaw puzzle together that I thought was in my head, that I just needed answers. And it was just that me trying to hold on to something that I thought I needed, because I was too worried about what life would be like without it. But in hindsight, and that's what I've learnt in that last stint in hospital, is just that final word of acceptance. Accepting that I can't control that. Accepting that I'm going to have pain. That I can't avoid that all the time. No, you can't avoid pain. It's inevitable that you're going to experience that. You've got to be able to deal with it. And that's what I finally realised, and being able to move on from there is...
Have you moved on?
I'm broken, and I find I'm still broken. But it's understanding what I've learnt and putting it into practice. So the sleep thing, the 11 to 7, getting up early, spending time on my mental health. I've actually, which is weird, I've put a whiteboard up in my room of just thoughts and that I can see. So you have all these thoughts and things in your head, but to make more sense of it is to get it out. If it's writing it on a piece of paper or having a journal, for me it's having a whiteboard at home. If it's trigger words up in that whiteboard, as soon as I wake up, I see it. As soon as I go to bed, I see it sitting there.
In a word, Marty, is he getting better?
Yeah. Look, he is, and I think that just the ability for him to tell the story, and you know, is a lot about the recovery and owning it, and accepting it, and understanding, I guess, the ripple effect that it potentially has had, and also just drilling down into what actually the main issues are. And I think that he's been able to do that, and you know, it's a hard thing. And I think the amount of things I've learnt through this process too is that you never quite, you haven't healed or you haven't conquered it. And I think that that's where a lot of people have got themselves into trouble. And I've heard Brian talk about it, I've heard others speak about the same thing. And it's about routine, it's about structure, it's about understanding the things that you need to be doing to make sure. And I think that now, as a society, I think that we're really starting to understand it. And, you know, I'm proud of the fact that, you know, he's put his hand up, he's getting help. And, you know, I'm just so glad that, you know, starting to get our friend back and our mate back, and that's the most important thing.
Brian, you've been exceptionally brave. I mean, I could almost join you in the tears, mate. I just admire your willingness to talk about your story. Wayne Swash would be very proud of you, mate. I think this is going to have a huge impact on people who are vulnerable in the community, and thank you for trusting me with it.
Thank you, Bob.
This has been a Fox Sports production.